What's going on YouTube? Ryos here, and today I'm going to be covering my top 5 favorite plugins at the moment. So the plugins I'm going to be discussing today are not going to be synthesizers or generators, like the stuff that actually makes the sound. It's going to be more processing plugins, so effects and stuff like that. I made something quick so that I could demonstrate to you guys how I use these plugins in a actual producing environment thing, and it sounds like this. So again, that was just something quick that I made, and let's start off with number 5 on this list. It's gonna be Camel Crusher. Now, Camel Crusher is a free plugin, I'm pretty sure, and I also think it was discontinued, but I'm sure you could find it somewhere on the internet. But anyway, it is honestly one of my go-to plugins. I use it for mainly leads and, things that I want fat. Basically, it's a distortion plugin with, 4 sections, fairly simple. My favorite preset to use on it is British Clean. So they have a bunch of presets here. I use British Clean and then I tend to tweak the mix. So in this song, so I use it on the vocal lead in the drop. So you can see it adds a lot. It brings a lot of life to the sound, makes it a lot more powerful. Camel Crusher also sounds great when you kind of push it to the limits and it's a little bit more extreme. So for example, I have this guitar in the drop. And I threw on Camel Crusher on the American Crunch setting. And it's crazy distortion and it sounds like this. I tend to gravitate towards Camel Crusher because it's just so easy to use. You guys saw it sounds great. And again, I think it's free. So number 5 on my list is Camel Crusher. So number 4 on my list, we have OTT. Now I'm sure all you guys have OTT. OTT is a very popular and free plugin, but I had to include it on this list because it is something that I use in every single song, no joke. Like, I always use OTT. And I love it a lot. So in this project here, you guys saw earlier when I showed you guys the vocal lead and I was demonstrating the Camel Crusher, I also have OTT on here, and the OTT does make a big difference. So let's play it with it. Now you can see there the OTT does make a big difference in helping out the vocal leads. I really love the sound of OTT. Like, it definitely adds some high end and it reduces the mid-range, and that sort of compressed, I don't know, it's so popular it became like the OTT sound. I'm a big fan of it. Just to show you guys how I would actually use OTT, if I load up a lead sound, so right here I have this super saw. And I have this instance of OTT that's not on yet. Let me turn it on and listen to the difference it makes. So as you guys see again there, it adds a little bit of brightness to the sound, takes away that mid-range so it doesn't seem as muffled, and it just adds a sort of compression that I think is it just sounds so good. It's free, it's easy to use, and that's why it's number 4 on my list. Alright, so coming in at number 3, we have a plugin called SuperVHS by Baby Audio, and it's definitely a sort of secret weapon of mine. I don't know if this plugin is just being slept on, or maybe not enough people know about it, but it's definitely one of my favorites and I've been using it all the time. So as you guys probably know by now, I love atmospheric, dreamy, that sort of style of music, and this plugin makes it so easy to achieve that. For example, I don't like taking sounds directly from plugins and using it straight up for the most part, especially the sounds that are most present. I kind of like making them my own through post-processing, and this plugin makes it so easy to do that. So for example, I have this vintage or vinyl sort of piano sound. Now, just by hitting this magic button right here, it adds a chorus to it that completely transforms the piano sound. And that right there sounds so cool to me, right? So they also have this heat knob that adds a bit of distortion. Which is cool to help warm up the sound a bit. I love this drift knob as well. It adds some pitch modulation to the sound and helps it sound a little bit less artificial and more human. And if I were to like exaggerate that, you can see it sounds like whirly, right? I think it's really cool, and it's definitely helpful if you make like hip hop beats, because I know a lot of hip hop melodies tend to have that sort of vintagey, whirly sort of vibe, and it's so easy. You literally just turn up the knob for more pitch modulation, so that's great. The wash knob adds like this sort of dark reverb. That's really great as well. This plugin also has a static and shape function, so the static is pretty self-explanatory. It adds a bit of static to the sound, which typically I don't use because I like to take static and put it in the track manually, but really cool that they offer that. And also the shape function adds a bit of bit crush, which is really cool too. And then what's great is that they do offer a mix knob, so you can sort of blend the sound with the original signal so that you get a proper balance. So I would leave it like right there, and I think the sound sounds way cooler than just this. As you guys saw right there, SuperVHS drastically changed the sound of that piano, and I've been using it all the time, so that's why it's number 3 on my list. So at number 2 on my list, we have FabFilter Q3. Now, I know I mentioned in the beginning of this video that I was going to use more plugins that I typically use in the production phase and not necessarily in the mixing and mastering phase. And the Q3 is what I normally use when I'm mixing and mastering, but I use it so much in the production phase as well that I had to include it on this list. It's probably one of my most used plugins, like, period. So I want to show you guys some of my favorite functions with it and how I use it. So, for example, I have these strings here. This feature right here is one of my favorites about this plugin. You can actually hear exactly what you're cutting off. Another thing I love about this plugin is it has the keys that correspond with the frequency listed above if you just click this piano button down below. Let's say, for example, you're mixing a bass and every time it hits the F note, it becomes way too powerful. What you could do, and what I've done, is you could literally just go to F1, make a narrow-ish Q, and then bring it down a few. And it typically helps even out the bass level. And that's just one of the many ways I use that function. Another thing I love about this plugin is that it can kind of be used as a stereo imager with the mid-side function. So for example, if we go back to these strings, under stereo placement, I can hit mid or side. So let's hit mid. Now what you're hearing right now is all the information that's in mono, and I'm cutting it away. So that kind of sounds a little bit strange. Benji, get down. Sorry, but that kind of sounds a little bit strange. So we'll bring it back, and what I would typically do is change this to side, pretty much making whatever's below here mono. So FabFilter Q3, number 2 on my list, amazing plugin. So a quick honorable mention before we get to number 1, it is Serum Effects. Now if you have Serum, you automatically have Serum Effects. Just go to the website and there'll be an option for the effects installer. And I'm telling you guys this because I did not know about Serum Effects for the longest time. Like, I recently just figured out, and that's why it's an honorable mention. I think when I have a little bit more experience with this plugin, it'll probably creep its way into my top 5 here, because it's absolutely crazy. You basically get all the effects that Serum comes with under the effects tab, but in a whole separate VST, so you can add it to, you know, a sound that's not from Serum. So I have this bass that's from Spire, and I'll play it with and then without the Serum effects so that you guys can see what it's doing. So this is with. And then without. This plugin is super cool, and what's really great is you can have so much fun transforming sounds and making them sound quite different than what you originally started with. And this processing that I have is relatively mild. I mean, you can go super crazy, you know, with the processing, and that's the reason, again, it didn't make it on my top 5, is only because I just found out about this and I don't really have much experience with it yet. So like I said, the more I use it, it'll probably sneak its way into my top 5, but I had to mention it because I had no idea about it. So maybe you guys already knew about it, but I think it's a really, really powerful effects processing plugin. So number 1 on my list, my favorite effects plugin at the moment, it's gotta be Focus One by Sick Individuals. This plugin is freaking crazy, guys. Basically, this plugin has 5 different faders that all add different things. So for example, it has Focus, which adds some compression, almost sounds like OTT. Then it has Boost, which gives a bump at around the 300 to 400 hertz mark, I would say. It adds a lot of warmth and body to a sound. It has the drive, which is pretty much distortion or saturation. Then this widen fader is pretty much a stereo imager, and it's actually crazy because you can push this thing pretty hard as far as how wide you want it to go, and it won't affect the mono compatibility, which is a really, really good thing. If you guys know, when you're trying to widen sounds in a more traditional way, let's say with delay or the Haas effect, sometimes when you make your mix mono, that sound disappears. And it's definitely not the case with this widen thing. So it's really cool. And then the last fader is this pulse fader, which basically is like an LFO. So for example, I have this lead sound here. And then with this quick processing I dialed in, it sounds like this. Without it. With it. As you guys saw there, drastic difference. This thing really helps fatten up lead sounds, but that's actually the great thing I love about this plugin, and the reason it's number one is it's not only good on EDM sort of lead sounds, it's pretty much good on everything. So for example, I have these Rhodes. And actually a really cool thing I forgot to mention is there's these exclamation marks above each fader, and it pretty much just does what it normally does, but like times 10. So if we take the focus fader and then turn extreme mode on, then we can use the boost fader to introduce some warmth back into the sound. Bit of drive. Then we can widen this thing however wide we want. And I typically don't use the pulse, but we can see how it sounds. You can see how powerful this plugin actually is. So this is with Focus 1 on the Rhodes. And then without. As you guys see there, massive difference. Now let me show you in the context of this drop that I made. So I used Focus 1 on the growl bass. It sounds like this. And if I turn it off, so I primarily use the drive function in this case with a little bit of focus to add some color to the sound. And in the context of the mix, it sounds like this. So again, Focus 1 doing its thing, making big differences out here, and that is why it is my favorite plugin at the moment. So those are my top 5 favorite plugins at the moment. I'll have them all linked down below in case you guys want to check them out. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell because I am uploading every week. If you guys have any requests, questions, or things you'd like to see from me, feel free to leave that in the comment section down below. But that would be all for me today, so I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, have a happy holiday, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace!